Hello everyone and welcome back. In our previous section, we started with creating the basic UI for login and sign up. We saw what are the basic widgets in Flutter. We also checked how we can navigate from one page to another. We learned about single responsibility principle and whatnot. So in this section, we would create the basic UI for our shopping application, that is our home page, and we will also see what API is and basically the documentation and the theoretical part of the API or application program interface. And so let's start doing it. So the shopping application can be considered as an Amazon application. The UI can be considered similar to that. So basically, what we have in a shopping application, we have a particular image of the product. Below that, we have the name of the product, the ratings, and the price of the product. So let's create something like that. So let's hot restart it. I would just change the entry point for quick usage so that we don't have to log in every time. Now on in the home page, let's create a single card. Basically, we have a widget called card and container is kind of similar, but card provides an elevated effect while container doesn't provide that effect. The card has a kind of circular border, while container has the simple borders. So let's create a card. In card, we would be using column, and in column let's add two children here right now, anything. So we can see the two cards. In column, we also have one more parameter called main axis size. Basically, main axis size means that how much size should your column occupy. We also have color parameter. So I just gave a color. Let's give some padding. Let's give it to 50 or 100. So you can see the size of the card. Or the other option is we can also wrap this particular card with container and just give this 10 wrapped with container, and we can also give it height and width of 50-50. Let's give this as 10. So let's give this as 100 and 100. Or the other option is to just give the padding. That's also a good option. So let's just use that. Perfect. Now let's give the card a image. So to give an image, we have different types of widgets. The two options are using a network image, that is a URL to render an image, or an asset to render an image. We would be using a URL. So we have a widget called image.network, and it takes a URL to print that image. Now let's see what image we can use. Let's search for Flutter logo, and let's use this image, or maybe this one, or this one. Yeah, this one looks good. Or this. Basically, your URL should end with .png or any network format. So you can see the image is visible, but this looks pretty bad. Let's change an image to a better one. Let me save this. Yep, this image looks good. So you can see we now have an image of a product. Let me just remove the color of the card. You can also give the elevation. Elevation, let's give it as 5. So you can see the embossed part. You can give it as 10 to give more shadow. 50. So you can see the entire shadow part, but I guess 10 looks good. And here it should be the title. So let's just give bag. Let's remove the center widget so that we have the card on top. And below the card, let's give the main axis, the cross axis alignment to start. Now, below the card, we would be printing the price and this entire thing, the bag and price should be in a row. So these both are in column, and there would be one more text of our rating. So let's just write 5 and star, or search for a star, and we have the rating. And here we have main axis alignment dot space between. So it basically gives space between the two cards, between the children of the row. So you can see a basic UI is ready. Let's give a particular price, maybe 100. Let's give some styling to it. Font size, let's give it to 20, maybe 30. And for this cost also, let's give some style. So basically, to give a style, we have a parameter called style, and style takes text style as a widget. Let's give font as 15. We can also give color to the text. So let's give it as maybe gray color or a bit darker shade. So you can also give shades as when you type colors dot a particular color dot shade. So you will be able to give shade to the colors. We have like shade 900, shade 800, 700, 600, etc. And let's give the style to our ratings as well. Now, for the ratings, it would be a good option to give style which is not too much, very big size. Maybe font size to be, I guess, 12 or 15, and color as gray. So you can see the ratings are also coming perfectly. The name is coming perfectly. The price is coming perfectly. You can also add the description, etc. Now this is just one product. Let's also give height and width to our image. We can all give height and width to our image by providing height widget, height parameter, and you can see the height can be given Let's give it to me 200. Yep, I think this looks good. Okay, so this is basically only one card of our UI. Now we need multiple cards. So, and that too in a list, like scrollable list. So we have a particular parameter, a particular widget called list view. So what we can do is let's just cut this entire padding or the child of the padding. Let's cut the entire card, and here we have list view is the param as the widget. Now inside the list view we have children. There are like multiple list views. We have list view, list view dot builder, list view dot separate. List view is created to create is used to create constant list view. Then we have list view dot builder where we can create dynamic list view. Like if you want to have multiple widgets which are different in size, different data, then we can use list view dot builder. List view dot separated is similar to list view dot builder, but the only difference is that it contains a particular widget in between each widget. So let's suppose that if you want to add a line between each item, then you can use list view dot builder. So here we would be using list view dot builder, and this item builder takes context and index. Here we just pasted our card that we created and save it. So you can see there are multiple cards of the same content. Now you can see this is infinitely scrollable because we have not provided how many items we need to render. So there is a parameter called item count. So if we give it 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and that's it. If we give it 10, it would render 10 elements. If we give it 1, it would render 1 element. And there is one more parameter called physics. Physics is basically how you would be able to scroll in your list view. So by default, it's the clamping list view, clamping scroll. So you can see when we scroll to the documentation, item physics, it creates a scrollable linear array, and item physics is how you are going to scroll your list. We have something called bouncing scroll physics. If you see, what it will do is it bounces at the end and start of the list. This is kind of iOS default feature where when you reach the starting or end of the list, it gets bounced. So this is kind of that. So you can see we have created a list view dot builder. Now one option was to create list view dot builder. Other way is to use column and single child scroll view. But in column we can't do dynamic listing like the way we did like item count. We can't do that. We have to use the for loop for that. But that's not a good practice. So this one is much better option. Let's give the name as shopping app. So you can see a basic UI is already ready. It was, just few minutes of code, around 15 to 20 minutes, and the basic UI of our application is already ready. You can let's just summarize this at least this much part. What we did first is we first created a single card. Card is a widget which gives a kind of embossed look, a better look than container. We can't provide height and width to card. We have to provide padding and size box and everything in card. Then in card we used column because we wanted to show image on top and details on the bottom. So we used column, and in column the first children was image.network. Basically, to render any image, we have multiple options, that is image.network or image.asset. Image.asset is used when you want to show a local image, and image.network is used when you want to show an image from a particular URL. Then we found a particular URL for the image, that was this bag image, and we added it to the image.network. We provided a particular height to it so that the image doesn't look at way too big. The next step was to add the details, where we wanted to show the name of the image, the price of the image, the price of the product, the ratings of that particular product. Now, based on the UI, the price and the title was in column, and that entire column was in row with the rating. So inside the row, the first element was our column, and inside column we had two texts, and then the second child of the second child of the row was the text with the rating. So you can see here, the row has two children, column and text. Column had this two, the title and price, and the text had the rating. Now, this basically constituted our single element, single card, or single item. Our next step was to create multiple items. So for that, we use listview.builder. Basically, to use list view, we have three types of list views: list view, listview.builder, and listview.separated. List view is used when we want to show constant or static list of items. List without builder is used when we want to show dynamic or items with different datas. And list without separated is used when we want to show a particular widget between each item of the list view. So, for example, if we want to add a line between each cards, then we can use list without separated. So list widget builder takes one parameter called item builder, and item builder takes a function with two parameters, that is context and index, and it returns a widget. So we pasted our card widget inside this particular widget, inside this item builder. And if we didn't provide item count, it created infinite list of items. So it became a responsibility to provide item count. So item count would be an integer value, and whatever item count we have provided, it will render the items based on the item count. So here we give item count as 10, so it rendered 10 elements. If we give 5, it rendered 5 elements, etc. In card, we have a parameter called elevation, which is responsible for showing the shadow behind the card. So that that is also an integer value. You can give it from 0 to etc. to infinite values. The default value is 1. Now, what exactly is basically, let's see, why do we need API first of all. We can't show static data in our application. That's totally useless. The one option is to show data from API. The other option is to show data from database. However, many times it happens that whatever data we want, it is already available in the form of API. On the other hand, in database, we have to first store the data, then fetch the data in your application, then show it. That's a kind of cumbersome task. The other option was API. So what you can do is you get that API URL, use it in your application, and get the data from that particular API. So what does exactly API mean? API is a URL. So whenever you request data from that API, that request goes to the server. The server checks whether you have access to this API or not. If you have access to this API, it checks which endpoint you have called. Now, whichever endpoint you have called, for example, if you have called www.google.com/Flutter, so you have called the Flutter endpoint. So it will check whether the Flutter endpoint has any data. If it has data, it will return that data, that particular data. Now, all the data that is returned from API is only and only in the form of JSON or HTML. Most widely uses JSON, and in Flutter, we can't use JSON directly. We have to convert just JSON to objects so that we can easily use it in our UI. Now, I hope that was clear. To summarize, API is an endpoint or a URL with which you can get data from a particular server. So you send a request to the API or to the server from your Flutter application. The server processes that request, it checks whether the server has data or not, and then the data is sent back to the Flutter application in the form of JSON format. JSON or HTML, the most widely used is the JSON format. Now, the Flutter application can't use the JSON format directly. So, we have to convert the JSON object into a particular model class which we can use in our application. Now, there are multiple ways we can send HTTP requests. Basically, the request has different types: get, put, post, delete, etc. Get is used to get any type of data from the server. Post is used to send some data to the server. Put is also used to send some data to the server. Delete is used to delete a particular record from the server. Most widely used is get and post requests. So to call an HTTP request, we have multiple packages in Flutter application. Now, what exactly is package? Package you can consider as a third party library which you can use in in your Flutter application. Let me just quickly show where you can find all the packages. So there is a website called pub.dev. So this is the official website where all the packages are available. Now over here you can search HTTP. So you can see that there is a package called HTTP which you can integrate for HTTP requests. Then we also have Chopper, which is also a package to implement implement HTTP requests. I have also published two packages. One is contact us and the other is parent child checkbox. Then we have retrofit. Then we have many other packages with which we can implement HTTP requests. We have DIO. The most widely used packages are HTTP, then DIO, retrofit. Yeah, these three are most widely used packages for HTTP request integrations. Even Chopper is widely used for HTTP requests. So we saw what exactly packages are and where we can get all the list of packages, but where can we add these packages in our application? So we have a file called pubspec.yaml. Let me just first clean this file up by removing all the comments and everything. Okay, so after clearing the file, you can see there is a parameter called dependencies. So all the packages that you want to add that will be added inside or below dependencies. This Flutter block is a package. Cupertino icons is a package. Cupertino icons is by default available, or whenever you create a new application, Cupertino icons will be added to your application. The next we want to add is HTTP package. So what there is a tip. Basically, there is a extension in VS Code called pubspec assist. This helps to easily add or remove a particular dependency. So what you have to do is when you install this particular extension and click on Control Shift P or Command Shift P and write add dependencies. So this is the first option. There are two types of dependencies and div dependencies. Dependencies are those packages that helps us to create a particular feature or to create something that user will be able to interact with. Dev dependencies are the packages that helps to simplify the work of the developers. For example, code generation packages would be part of dev dependencies. Any UI packages would be part of dependencies. And any lint rules are basically the rules which should be followed during the code development or while writing the code. So you can click on add dependencies and write the package name. So we would be using HTTP. HTTP is the base package for the HTTP request. All the other packages, there is Dio, Retrofit, Chopper, etc., are built on this HTTP package. You click on enter and you can see that the HTTP package was directly added with the latest version that was available on pub.dev. And then you have to do pub get. And you need to keep in mind that whenever you add or remove a particular dependency or a package from your application, you have to terminate your application, run flutter pub get, and then again run your application so that the package gets downloaded to your local system. Now, I hope that was clear. Now, what you have to do is in the further steps, we have to create a HTTP client which would send a request to the HTTP server, and that server would return us a JSON format file. Now, we can't create servers for free, right? For development purposes, we normally use fake APIs. Now, Google has lots and lots of fake APIs. If you just search for fake REST APIs, you will get a lot of fake REST APIs. Fake REST APIs. You can see there is a website called JSON Placeholder. When you go to JSON Placeholder and scroll down a bit, and you can see there are this many APIs slash post slash command slash album slash photos to dos users etc. Then we have this dummy JSON. These are also the APIs that we can use. That is, dummyjson.com slash product slash one products, cards, users, posts, comments, quotes, to dos, HTTP, auth, etc. Then we have fake REST API, Mockito, etc., etc., etc. So for this particular application, we would be using this fakestoreapi.com slash products. It returns a list of products. You can see there are lots of products that have been written from this API. I guess 20 products are being written from this API. Each product has its ID, title, price, description, category, image, and rating. Now, I'm using an extension called JSON Viewer Pro. Feel free to download it. It basically helps you to view a particular JSON in much better way. Or if you don't use it, you will be able to see the JSON like this, which is totally not readable. So it's always a good practice to use this JSON whenever you are working with APIs so that you can view your JSON file in much, much proper format. And get this JSON, you can just go to JSON input and copy this JSON, entire JSON. Now, if we closely look at this JSON, it contains ID, title, price, description, category, image. It contains a map called rating, and inside that we have again rate and count. And same way we have second object, third object, fourth object, etc. So if we want to access this particular rate, what we have to do is response dot ratings dot rate. So that's a bit of tiring process. So it's always a good practice to create a model class out of this JSON file. So let's get started with that. First, we have already added HTTP package in our application. The next step was to create the model class. So let's just copy this. And there is a website called QuickType. So you can just search for app.quicktype, paste the JSON in the left hand side, select in language, select Dart, and yeah, that's it. So you can see the entire model class is being created. So you just have to copy it in your code. We have the home page. Inside home page, let's create a folder called models. And in this models form, let's create product underscore response dot dot. Here we paste the response model and add required to this all the parameters. Why required? Because we won't be accepting any null values for this particular variable. Let's rename the class. Let's give it as product response. Also rename the functions. And that's how we have created a model class. Basically, if we see, there are two particular methods: product response from JSON. It converts a JSON format, JSON string, to list of our object because we have multiple objects in our response. Next is from to JSON. It converts our list of object to JSON. Next, we have the class product response. It contains all the parameters that were ID, title, price, description, category, image, rating, etc. And we have again a factory constructor, that is, it is from JSON dot from JSON, and it converts your JSON to a single product response object. So you can see it accesses JSON of ID, JSON of title, JSON of price, JSON of description, JSON of category, JSON of image. And if you remember, rating was a nested object. So we have a separate class for rating which contains rate and count, and it converts your rate and count to your rating object. So I hope the model class how we have created is pretty clear. If to summarize, what we did was we first fetch which API we are going to use. So in this project, we would be using the fake product API. From that, we copied the JSON, and after copying the JSON, we pasted the JSON into QuickType.io. It is a website which allows us to create model classes. Now, once we have the model class, we copied that model class into our code. We created a folder inside home folder called models, and inside models, we created a file called product underscore response.dat. We pasted our entire model class in this particular file and renamed the class name from welcome to product response, and we also renamed the product response from JSON, the methods that we had. After renaming the methods, we added the required keywords for all the particular parameters in the constructors because we won't be accepting null values. Now, product response from JSON is responsible for converting JSON response to list of objects that we have. Product response to JSON is responsible for converting list of product response to JSON format. This was about model class. So, what exactly did we learn in this section? First, we created a single card for our UI, which contained a product image, and below that it contained the name of the image, the price, and the rating. So basically, we used three new widgets in this section. One was card. The next was image.network, card, image.network, and list.builder. Card is similar to container, but it gives a much more better look. It gives elevation, it provides a kind of shadow feel. And then we have image.network. Image.network is responsible for rendering images from a particular URL. We can also use image.asset for rendering a local image. Then we saw list2.builder. List2.builder is basically if you want to create list of widgets which is scrollable, we can use list view, list2.builder, or list2.separated. List view is used only if we have a constant list of widgets, that is a static list of widgets with no data changes, then we can use list view. List view builder is used if our data is different for each item. So we would be using list-view.builder for this project. And list-view.separated is similar to list-view.builder. The only difference is that if you want to add a particular widget between two widgets, then you use list-view.separated. For example, if you want that in between each card there is a line, there should be a line, then you use list-view.separated. Then we saw what is a package, what is dependencies and dev dependencies. All the packages you can be available on pub.dev, and whatever package you want to add, you can add it in dependencies part. Dev dependencies will contain all the packages that would help the developer in developing something, and the dependencies would contain the packages that actually develops a particular feature. So for example, HTTP package we would be using for HTTP requests. We have different packages like HTTP, diode, chopper, retrofit, etc. So HTTP package would be creating our entire HTTP client side. That's why it creates a feature and hence it is added in the dependencies part. On the other hand, if we have a code generation package, then that usually is being added into dev dependencies. After adding the package, we then moved to the API part where we first checked the API, what API we are going to use. We then created the model class out of that API. And once the model class was created, we now in the next section, we would be creating our client side or the server side of the API where we would be calling this particular API from our Flutter application. We would get the response out of this API. And once the response is available, we would show this response on the UI part. Once the UI, once the response is available, we would show this on the UI part using the model class that we created. And this way, our entire application would be ready with the response from the API and accessing it with the model class. Thank you.